Hey everyone, welcome back to Lumber Capital Log Yard. In today's video, we are actually doing something that was highly requested by a lot of our viewers, and that would be a tutorial on how to sharpen your chainsaw. Obviously, a lot of people use chainsaws, not just us loggers, so I'm thinking that this is going to be a pretty valuable video. So let's get into it.
So I want to try and teach you some things that you might not know. Maybe if you do know them, you can refine your technique a little bit. There are 3 different things that will make your chain not cut. And most people think that you just need to sharpen your chain and that will make it work. And that is why a lot of times a sharp chain still will not cut. So let's talk about it. The first thing is the bar. Now this bar is still in good shape. This is a bar that I brought in from the woods to the log yard, and we're at the log yard today because of the rain that we've had. And this bar is not a bar that I will use in the woods anymore. I use it only for firewood. Now Oregon bars has their name printed on both sides, which is convenient because when I put the bar on, I put the bar on with the name up, and then as soon as I change a chain, I turn around the bar upside down or the other way, and then the name will be upside down. So it's just a little sight indicator. Now, why would I do that? And the reason I do that is because the rails on the bar begin to wear. And of course you're not going to be able to see this on the video, but when I pull my fingers up across that, I can feel that that is actually mushroomed. It's actually razor sharp on the side because of that mushrooming over. You can actually see a little bit of wear right where the bar tip goes on. So what happens is when we bring the bars back into the yard, we'll take them, put them on a grinder, and grind that edge off of there where it begins to mushroom out. The next thing that you need to know is the rails of the bar will actually begin to separate or expand between them. And when they do, when you have when your chain is actually physically on the bar and you're running your chainsaw, I'm putting this on backwards, but I think it will work for the video. You see what I mean. Now this bar is still in good shape, but your chain can lay off to the side one way or the other. And like I said, this chain or this bar is in good shape, but you can see how that even after a little bit of wear, the chain can fudge in the bar. Now it should move a little bit, but what happens is you will have a really sharp chain and it will cut incredible as the bar goes down into the piece of wood if you're cutting firewood. But as soon as the bar is the entire distance into the wood, the cut begins to go sideways. It will actually start to get a C shape to it. As soon as that's happening, you're pinching your bar here and then you're pinching it on the other side and it just stops. And that's simply because this groove where the chain rides, where the inside of the chain rides is actually worn out and the chain is going off to one side or the other. So there's several different techniques. There's tools that you can buy that will bring the bar back into being true. We actually put a thin piece of metal in the groove of the bar and then take a plastic ball peen hammer and tap it back in. Now again, this is once I do this, I'm not using that bar in the woods, but at $50 a bar, we want to get some more mileage out of them. So they come to the log yard, and then we use them for firewood or if we have to trim anything. So, and they certainly work good for that. So a logger is going to feel very differently about how their felling saw is and how it's set up than necessarily than their firewood saw. So you have a couple different ideas and techniques on that. Now I want to show you the tools that I use. I use a file, and I know a lot of loggers, they're probably laugh, but I do use a file guide. I've always used one. I think they're convenient. If I'm sharpening my chain when I don't have good light, I can almost do it with my eyes closed just by feeling, but that file guide helps. You have a flat file, and then you have a gauge for your rakers. So those are the three tools that you need to sharpen your chain. So here we have, you know, I use the 390s. I've talked to you about that before. This is a saw that's 3 or 4 years old. Probably everything's been replaced or changed. We've cannibalized it many times to keep it going. And now this saw is dedicated to being here at the yard. So one of the things I want to show you is I've seen a lot of people run their chains like this. To me, that is an absolute no-no. Your chain should never be that loose. First of all, it could fly off, but again, you're getting that slop in there. So I insist that it be tight. It always ought to be tight. With the Husqvarna saws, you have to put a little bit of pressure out on the end to pick that up to get it tightened up. The other reason I like my chain tight is that when I let off the throttle, I want the chain to stop on its own. I don't want it to sit there and spin. So, and I use my chain brake all the time. These chain brakes, we break them, and the saw goes into the shop, and Grandpa replaces them for me all the time. But now you can see that's fairly tight, and that's how I like it. So I mentioned in a previous video that I like to use a vise. Again, we're here at the log yard over by the firewood processor, and I just have a station set up. A customer from that owned a Subway gave me this wonderful stainless steel table. He did that about 10 or 12 years ago. We actually used to take it to the log sites. I mounted the vise on it, and that allows you to get a really level way to sharpen your saw. So let's take a look at this. So I use the same chain on all of my saws. I use a 20-inch bar, which I mentioned in the past, that keeps it away from your toes, and I use 3/8 50 gauge. That is the sizing of the chain. So you have to have a matching file for 3/8 50 gauge. That file is a 7/32 round file. So that is what this chain requires in file size. So if you come over here, when the chain is dull and starts to miscut, this is going to be very hard to see, but I want you to understand it. So this is actually the only part of the chain that is cutting. It's this tip and right down around in here, and then the rest of this clears the debris out of the way. If this tip is shiny, that's an indication that the chain is dull. What will happen is it will actually begin to hook over. It will actually begin to curve down like that. So if you look at it very closely, you'll see they're curved. The other thing is that right across here, where I'm laying this small screwdriver, flat screwdriver, this can get just a slight shiny curve to it, and that indicates that your chain is dull. Now I'm using Oregon chain, and if you can get a shot from the top, you will see that Oregon chain has an indicator. I think it's actually a wear indicator. It's a line that runs at an angle right across, and that is the same angle then that you file your chain. So that is just a sight indicator, and then of course you don't want to file beyond that because your tooth could break off. So I'm gonna switch sides. So I want you to be able to see this. So you run the file across flat, okay? And I use two hands, and I know there's different techniques to this, but if you are only sharpening the top of the cutting tooth, it's not going to be as sharp as you want it. You want to get all the way down in there. So as I come flat across, I'm using my thumb on the outside of the file guide, and I am just putting a little bit of downward pressure. Now, the saws that I run, I generally have not damaged the chain. So I take 3 stripes across, 3 swipes, and that is going to sharpen it. And then I take one last swipe, and it's just a cleaning, very light swipe. It would be like leather strapping a razor for your face. If I don't know how to do that, but it's that final, like, I'm just cleaning it off and putting that final very sharp edge on the cutting tooth. Now, after I do my cutting teeth, I take a raker guide, and you lay the raker guide across the tooth so that the raker is in the center, and then you take a flat file and you go across, and this guide should take your raker, once you use your flat file, down to the right gap between the raker and the cutting tooth. So remember I said when you're sharpening your chain and your chainsaw isn't cutting, there's 3 different things. There's the bar, and the chain can be laying over on the side and cavitating. There's actually the cutting tooth itself, which most people think that's what needs to be sharpened. But then there's the raker. And what the raker will do, if it is not filed down, is when you cut into the wood, it will actually force the saw up over your cutting material, and your tooth isn't digging into it. So the raker has to be taken down as well as the tooth. Just as a rule of thumb, when I put a new chain on, I file it twice, sharpening it, and then the third time I take down the rakers. That's just a rule of thumb. That's if I'm doing my standard 3 to 5 swipes across, and I haven't damaged or done anything to the chain itself. Just a couple other things to watch for. If you ever see a blue spot appear in your bar, if you see a hot spot, you know you're pinching in there, and or your bar may be bent, which would of course cause it to pinch. And that bluing then of course is you've actually changed the content of the steel, you've hardened it in there. I'm using Oregon chain. Oregon chain is softer than steel chain. And you say, well, why don't you use steel chain? If that's harder, it lasts longer. If you think about it, your sharpest blades, your best chefs in the world aren't necessarily using stainless steel. They may be using just regular carbon steel because it's softer. 440 stainless steel is so hard it doesn't actually get an edge. I happen to like the softer steel. It is easier to file and get sharp. So if you're using steel chain, you actually have to use a steel file because the file itself is a harder file. So if you are using steel chain in an organ file, again, you're going to be thoroughly disappointed. Just another thing to watch for. Now I wanted to tell you about a couple other things. This chain here is 440 harvester bar, or harvester chain. That is what we run on the firewood processor. You can see it is a much heavier duty chain than the 3/8 50 gauge that I use on the chainsaw. I'm only using this as an example because if you take your chain to a company to have them sharpen it, they're going to use a commercial grinding system for doing it. When they do that, can you still see me? This area here will get extremely hot. And I have a grinder that I sharpen chains with back at home in our saw shop. And I actually use a diamond blade for it. But that will get extremely hot. So again, you've changed the temper of the chain itself. So when you go to use your file on it, there's a good chance it's just going to run right over it like you have a dead file. So if you can learn to hand file, it is so much sharper. My first sharpening is sharper than the brand new chain out of the box. And usually it only gets better. Now, chains do wear and you do hit stuff here and there. And a lot of times by the end of the chain life, I am very happy to put a new chain on. But a lot of times it just gets better as I go. Not always, but sometimes. The other thing I wanted to show you just as a tip is I don't soup my saws up. I know there is specialty saw shops where you can send your saws out and they will report them and do all sorts of wonderful things to them. I never spend the money on it. I'm thoroughly happy with the performance of the Husky 390 and the steel comparable saw. But one of the things I do is I change the gear cog that the chain rides on, and what I'm doing is I'm adding a new gear with one additional tooth. I guess you'd call it a sprocket. I'm adding one more sprocket tooth on my chainsaw, and what that does is it speeds up the chain itself. So I'm running a high horsepower saw with a 20-inch bar, and then I change the sprocket and it spins a lot faster. And with the higher horsepower machine, the chain spinning faster, it's really not getting dogged down at all. The only time it would really get dogged down is if I would lower my rakers too much. And we've done a lot of experimentation with taking a little extra off the raker. I really don't like it. The chain dulls out too fast. We've had a lot of trouble with the processor. Grandpa took down a couple of the rakers as an experiment, and he took them down a little too low, and the thing just cuts so incredible for one cord, and then the chain just completely stops. And it's a real pain in the neck to change those chains with all the bar oil and stuff that's flying around. So hopefully that was an interesting tutorial. I'll try and respond to the comments on this video over the next couple days. I know it's not as exciting seeing me as it is seeing the girls run the mill, but we like to give you a little bit of information so that you can be better sawyers, better loggers, and know how to tune up your own machines and save yourself a lot of money and time running off to the store. I also want to say a word of thanks to Lee. He sent me a knife. He knew I was a little jealous of Emerald's knife. There's a link in, how do you say that, Em?
It's an email.
An email description on our YouTube page. So she can correct this. This is redwood. It is so gorgeous. I love it. And I do have to say, Lee, that I am not going to wear it as to work on a daily basis. I know you would love it if I would, but it's just too beautiful and too valuable. So that just isn't going to happen. But I am very grateful. I wear it when I'm going out and I have a little different clothes on. So thank you again for that. And I also wanted to say, I know the last time I did a video I said this and we sort of flopped at it. Samantha is going to be doing a video for our members, and we hope this is going to be a weekly video, and she's doing a week in review, and she's already told me her ideas and I'm already laughing thinking about them. She's very excited about it, so she's going to be doing one video a week for the members only, and it will hopefully be out on Sunday. Em and her, I think, have that figured out. So hopefully we'll pull it together this time and pull that off. So just I guess a little plug for that. So thank you for your time again, and good luck sharpening your chainsaw chains.